Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Rotary meeting for Monday, January 10th. Our speaker for today is Robert McVeigh from Compass Minerals up in Goderich, otherwise known as the Sifto Salt Mine up in Goderich. And Robert's bio picture, he's very lucky because most people should know that if you include an animal in your bio picture, it's going to be the animal that gets attention instead of the person. But I kept both Robert and the dog in the picture. So I'm hoping we'll get an introduction to the dog during your presentation, Robert. I am going to pass control over to Howard to do a more formal introduction of Robert.
Thanks, Don. Good morning, everyone, and welcome, Robert. So Robert grew up in the small coal mining town of Waterford, Nova Scotia on beautiful Cape Breton Island. He is a graduate of Dalhousie University's mining engineering program, and he began his career in mining in 2008 with Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan in Sussex, New Brunswick. And while there, he oversaw the closure of an existing mine that had been in operation since the early 1980s, and then played a key role in the development of a new $2.2 billion operation, which was by far the largest in Atlantic Canada. After the New Brunswick operations were shuttered in 2016, Robert spent a year traveling North and Central America. He was then recruited by Compass Minerals to join their Sifto Salt Mine in Goderich, Ontario. And there, Robert works with a team of highly talented subject matter experts in the fields of surveying, rock mechanics, ground control, geology, ventilation, and short and long-range mine planning. And today he will take us on a virtual tour of the largest salt mine in the world. So please join me in welcoming Robert McVeigh.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Perfect. All right, so as mentioned, I've been at Goddard for about 3 years now, working in the engineering department. So I'm by no means a subject matter expert compared to some of the folks that have been here for their whole career or 30 plus years, but I'll try my best to answer any questions that may arise during this presentation. And as mentioned, feel free to unmute yourself and ask while I speak. I won't at all be offended, or if you prefer, there should be a question period at the end, and I'll turn my camera on and try my best to answer anything you may have. So the next slide is a video that we were fortunate to be able to make with a local photographer in support of our family day. So for the first time in many years, we were able to do a family tour day this year, or at the end of 2021, where each mine employee was able to bring up to 2 family members or friends underground to see the operation. We recognized that it wouldn't be possible to take everybody in the community that wanted to be underground down those days. Even though we were able to get about 600 people cycled through, we still wanted to put something together to really show everybody else a glimpse of what the mine looks like. So we'll start off by playing that and hopefully give you a bit of an idea of the things I'll be speaking to later in the presentation.
Goderich Salt Mine is as deep or as far down as the CN Tower is tall, and it goes out approximately 5 kilometers, and it is growing.
A typical day would be starting off with the coffee naturally, coming in, doing a crossover talk with the midnight crew, seeing what happened on the events of the night.
So I look after the overhauls on the continuous miners. So you can see the one behind us here. This is CM1, it's our oldest miner here. I think it's been here about 8 years. It's just in for an overhaul. We do overhauls based on tonnage. Usually it takes about a few weeks to do one of these overhauls.
Well, it's the miner is a pretty big machine. It's a 50-foot machine. It has a crusher wheel, which is the continuous miner part. So then it's full of bits, which is what I'm doing right now, is changing bits. It's 50 feet long, as I said before. It has a gathering head underneath the wheel, and it gathers the muck as it cuts it and comes out on the conveyor belt or conveyor chain, which goes on to the belt, which is the FCT. This is the remote that I use to run the miner. It's very much like the joystick for your your PlayStation or Xbox that you got at home. It's a little bit less where you'll have 2 joysticks. I've got all this in one panel.
This is the Terrex Bolter. It's a high-reach bolter. We're putting in 18-foot bolts today in the back to help hold the back up. We put bolts in the ceiling to prevent the back from caving in, because over time the back likes to settle, just to keep everyone safe.
They cut the salt, send it down the belt line into the mill processes it, and sends it out to highway side, highway C4, that's our highway salt or road salt, and then the chem C4, that's our chemical salt. So after it goes through the mill, it just breaks down, goes through our processing out in the mill, and comes into these chutes, sits in the piles there, and then we have to open the chutes down here, and the loader pushes it down the hole to go to surface.
My job is to push that finished product to surface, and then from surface they either load it on the rail cars, the boats, or the transport trucks.
I load the salt on the boats, and I load the salt on the rail.
Mainly what we do here is we try to ensure all the product is up to spec, and so we do all the testing on everything that comes from underground, all the samples that are processed in the mill, everything like that. So we make sure everybody knows that it's up to spec and it's good to go out.
And this is the brains of the operation here. We take all the telephone calls, we talk to the captains on the boats that come in, we take their load plans, and we send all that information over to the office. And we pretty well look after all the controls on the conveyors, the crushers, the fans, the water pumps underground. Just about everything you can think of comes from here.
It's a great career. It's always changing. There's always new stuff. We got lots of equipment here, lots of great people. You want a challenge, there's a challenge here. It's actually a really great spot to work. Great group of guys. I probably can't say enough.
Well, it's nice being underground. Temperature's always nice. It's not raining on us working on this equipment. It's just a good place to be.
You know, it's a very interesting place to work. There's lots of good jobs, lots of neat jobs, really, when you think about it. This here miner is, as I said, 50 feet long, and you run it with a joystick. You run it with a remote. There's lots of things to do down here, all kinds of jobs in the mill, different areas.
I like working here because it's a new job every day.
The best thing about working here is the atmosphere and the friendships that you make throughout the years here.
My role here at the mine I really love because I get to work with everybody on the mine site, and I get to work closely with the VP.
I couldn't think of a better place to come to work. I have the best view in town, overlooking the beach and the harbor.
So working at the mine here is it's a great opportunity. I think everybody around kind of knows that. It's Goderich and the mine were one of the reasons that my family moved here. So it's great to work here, especially minutes from the site. Amazing commute, an amazing place to work, and great people to work with.
This job here is the best job on the mine site right here. All this modern equipment in here, and I'll tell you, it's great. It's the best thing going right here. And when I started here, everything was push button, and you had mechanical levers to pull. There was none of this electronic equipment here. Nothing. There was nothing here.
I do live in Goderich. I've lived here most of my life. I do know the majority of the people that work here from school. It's like being in school still.
Goddard is awesome. It's got lots of beach areas for everybody to enjoy. Great community, lots of schools in the area, lots of activities for the kids, and pretty family orientated.
And we love it here. Between me working here and us living in Goderich, it's a great commute, it's a wonderful place to work, great people to work with.
So my grandfather started working here in '62, and then my uncle also worked here, and my brother currently is the store supervisor, and my mom also has worked here before too. Yes, it's always been a goal for me to be working here, so I'm very glad to be with Compass Minerals.
right, so that was a bit of an intro to our site itself, and you get a chance to see some of the equipment and people we have underground. And I'll walk through the remainder of the slideshow that'll focus really on the company as a whole before diving into Goderich Mine itself. So as mentioned, our company name is Compass Minerals, commonly referred to as CIFTO Salt Mine or CIFTO Canada. That really means a lot more to people than the Compass Minerals name, just because of the CIFTO history in Canada. And our packaged salt, which would go on tables, French fries, animal feed, different things like that, still goes by the brand name CIFTO as well. Whereas really the highway de-icing or the bulk salt that we sell to de-icing roads primarily goes by the Compass Minerals name. So Compass Minerals does provide both salt and plant nutrition. We're focused on being an essential minerals focused company and safely delivering those products to our customers and communities. On the salt side of things, we are the leading salt producer in North America and the United Kingdom. So we do have competition from other outfits such as Detroit Salt or Windsor Salt that you'd be familiar with in Canada. But Goderich Mine is the biggest salt mine in the world, and Compass Minerals is the biggest producer of those products. On the plant nutrition side, we do produce a product called sulfate of potash, which is a premium product compared with your standard potash fertilizers on the market. So we do that in Ogden, Utah on the Great Salt Lake, as well as Wynyard, Saskatchewan here in Canada. By market, salt is really our bread and butter. So about 78% of our income comes from the salt side of the business, with 22 or so from the plant nutrition side. And if you were to break that salt down even further, you'd see about 50% of that number comes from highway de-icing, and a very small percentage of our income comes from what we would call food grade salt or chemical salts from the evaporation sites. So a very large company, as you can see, in the 2020 fiscal year, we had about $1 billion in revenue, 12 facilities, about 2,000 employees, and about $100 million in operating earnings. We do have a competitive portfolio with those two products that we produce, but we also have the largest underground salt mine, as I mentioned, in Goderich, as well as evaporated salt facilities in 3 other locations across Canada. So that'd be 2 in Saskatchewan, essentially, and 1 in Amherst, Nova Scotia. And in the UK, we operate a salt mine for de-icing, as well as a document storage division. So our UK mine is one of the oldest mines in the United Kingdom. And since they've been mining so long and excavating these areas, they recognize that they'd be able to use that climate-controlled mine as a storage facility for secure storage for the National Archives of the UK, for banks, any organization that really needs a long-term storage facility. There's actually an architect in our UK mine that has an entire storage area dedicated to simply his mock-ups or scaled down versions of his buildings. So in the United States, we also have a big arm of the company that has solar evaporation. So as mentioned, the Great Salt Lake in Ogden, Utah, we produce both salt and potash fertilizer from that facility. And it is the largest mag chloride production site in the Western Hemisphere. So magnesium chloride is really used a lot for dedusting services, but an arm of our company that's been introduced fairly recently also focuses on using that magnesium chloride from the Great Salt Lake as a fire retardant for aerial spraying from airplanes to combat forest fires. So along with that production site in the US, we also have another salt mine in Louisiana called Cote Blanche, which would be about a third the size of Goderich, and most of their product would come up the Mississippi to the Midwest area of the US. We also have a research and development facility and our head office in the United States as well. So in Kansas City is our head office, or Overland Park, Missouri. They're across the river from each other. And we also have an R&D lab facility in that general Kansas City area as well. So what that looks like on a map, you can really see the 2 facilities shown in Saskatchewan in Canada. Goderich is indicated by the arrow for our evaporation plant in town here, as well as the salt mine. And other than that, we have some sales offices in Mississauga and Quebec, and a evaporation plant in Nova Scotia. So when I mention evaporation plant, anytime we would want to make food grade salt or very, very high purity salt, that would be done through evaporation of brine and leave behind the sodium chloride crystals. So at the site here in Goderich, they would drill wells down into a salt layer and pump water down into those to wash the salt out and make a brine, and then pump that brine to surface and evaporate it in our plant. And the same process is done in Nova Scotia, in Amherst as well. Interestingly enough, I used to work at a salt mine about 45 minutes away from that Amherst plant. So it very much is a small world in mining. Now down in the US, you can see the big compass indicator for our head office and our research and development site. And then to the left of that would be our facilities in Ogden, Utah, the far left. And then down at the bottom would be the salt mine in Cote Blanche, Louisiana. And then off to the right, not to scale, would be the two facilities in the United Kingdom. So we have what's called our Winsford Salt Mine in Cheshire, as well as a storage facility on surface and a storage facility underground for that deep storage division. So all in all, about 3 salt mines, the UK, Canada, and the US, and then a plethora of evaporation and packaging sites where they would either produce food grade salt or take highway salt and rebag it to go out to customers that would spread it on their driveways, stepways. So here in Goderich itself, you guys would know, or you folks would know, sorry, that we're about an hour and 20 minutes from London, in the beautiful town of Goderich, and sitting right on the shore of Lake Huron. So we're about 1,800 feet below the lake, and the mine workings themselves progress entirely out under the lake itself. There's nothing under the town or under anybody's homes. All the mine workings are underwater. So being about 1,800 feet deep, we are about as deep as the CN Tower is tall, and we've been operating since about 1959. So salt was identified long before that in the area through oil and gas drilling, but it wasn't until 1959 that the decision was made to put into production an underground mine. The salt produced here at site travels throughout North America, but primarily through the Great Lakes region and is spread on roads. The Great Lakes are really beneficial for us in the sense that we're located right on the shore of a lake, so it's very easily to load vessels with salt, and that's really the cheapest way to move salt around. So other places I've worked that had to truck salt to the ocean or train salt to the ocean, you incur a great big cost in order to manage that salt getting from your mine to the offload facility. And Goderich is lucky in that sense that we're right on the water, and we also have a very deep water port. So we can accept about a 30,000 ton vessel into Goderich, where other mines might be able to fill a 6,000 to 7,000 ton vessel, depending on the size of their harbor. We do truck a bit of salt as well as by vessel. So generally trucks move in the winter season to the local area because salt is indeed a bulk commodity and you can only truck it so far before it's uneconomical to continue. And we also haul a little bit of salt up to our evaporation plant in Goderich, where they take it and rebag it as SIFTO safety step salt that you might see in Canadian Tire, for example. We do produce about 10% of our overall production goes out as what's called chemical salt. So that's a very high purity salt. It is more than 99% sodium chloride or NaCl. And that goes to chemical manufacturers that do plastics, detergent, disinfectants, and products like that. Again, around the Great Lakes region. So a large chunk of that is in Quebec, but also Milwaukee area. The plant in town, as I mentioned, it uses mechanical evaporation to produce very high purity and fine and coarse grain salt. So they'd be your table salts, your kosher salts, pressed salt, I guess, for animal licks, pool salt, as well as water softener salt. So all those very high purity products that you don't want any rock component within them or impurities within them. So a snapshot of what the mine site would have looked like in 1959 is shown there. So you see a large causeway coming out to an island, I'll call it, but all that island was man-made. So originally the Maitland River came through Goderich and emptied into Lake Huron. And when the decision was made to construct the salt mine, the island or peninsula was really created with backfill. So a lot of the material that was dug out of the shafts in order to get down that 1,800 feet would have been dumped in order to build the causeway and island. And it's a very, very small footprint. So we're quite fortunate in that we're, less than less than 5 minutes from a town. Really, we're in a major town, and about an hour from big cities like London or Kitchener. But unfortunately, with that, we have a very small footprint on surface that we must be confined to. So it makes things like construction activities challenging when you have truck traffic coming through the site, and you may also be trying to set up cranes and do major work. Also in this photo, you can see in the background grain silos. So the Port of Goderich is also used to bring in grain from around the Great Lakes and also ship it overseas. So Compass doesn't have any say in any of that, or we're not involved in any of that, but we share the Goderich port with that other use. And more recently, the port has also completed a northern expansion. So in addition to salt, grain, we are now moving out aggregate for road construction off of the northern expansion. So a good time in Goderich, things are busy. Now in more recent photo, this would have been taken in 2005 or so. So you can see a vessel being loaded for salt, and you can see up the Maitland River that I mentioned previously. And we're in a very environmentally sensitive area. So as mentioned, we're right on the lake, so you have to be incredibly cautious with any spills. And we're very much adjacent to the town. So just to the top right of the picture is the town of Goderich, where you can hear equipment alarms if you're close enough proximity. So we always have to be cognizant of our neighbors and be a good environmental steward to the area, especially given the beach just across the road, the town right there, and a marina just behind us that you can see the plethora of sailboats show. So unfortunately, in the early 2010s, we had a tornado come through the property, as you may be aware. So it really started around the mouth of the Maitland River there and traveled up the Maitland. But in that process, it came across the mine site and severely damaged some of our surface infrastructure, such as the administration building, our storage buildings, and the ship loader itself. And quite unfortunately, there was a man killed on site that happened to be running the ship loader when that tornado came through the property. So in the years following the tornado, the site saw a lot of construction activities to repair the administration building and the domes, as well as the head frames and shafts and various milling buildings. So the next photo really shows what the site looks like now. So the dome that had been previously furthest west out onto the peninsula had come down during the tornado and wasn't rebuilt. And you can see all of our new infrastructure with that blue color to it, really showing the before and after effect of the tornado. A lot of construction happened here following that. Another similar shot. So that really shows how close the beach is to us. So just across the turning bay or the harbor, you can see Goderich Beach, and all summer long, we are packed with tourists. So again, you don't want large amounts of dust on site or large amounts of noise on site, since we're in close proximity to the town and our neighbors. So a view from above is what's shown here. The picture on the right-hand side would be from Google Maps and strictly shows the airport north of Goderich, the town of Goderich itself, and the historic square. And then the mine workings are the colorful red, black, blue, green lines to the left of that. So as I mentioned, we start out on the man-made peninsula, and all the mine workings travel north and south from there, and then west out under the lake. So we're about 6 kilometers north-south and about 5 kilometers east-west. The active mining faces, or the active mining areas, are what's shown in the more rainbow type colors. So the blue, green, blue, green, black, and then the red area and black area near the town have all been mined out in the previous decades to their potential. So each day our employees are traveling about 20 minutes from the elevator down into the mine out to the current working faces in the northwest type area. And I mentioned we did do a northern expansion of the Goderich port. So an area was backfilled in order to construct another pier, I guess, or unloading area. And what you see there is aggregate brought in for road construction. So large vessels come in and dump that product here in Goderich, and then it would be used in the local area for road construction and maintenance in the summer months. So some of our employees are shown there in one of our smaller front-end loaders, actually on surface. but all the employees shown there are female. So in the last 3 years, we've really tried our best to catch up to the rest of the mining industry. Goderich was in poor state when I started about 3 years ago. We did not have any female operators underground. So if you were to look at Ontario as a whole, we'd be lagging well behind them. And really, when you look at some other countries like Australia, way behind them, where almost half the workforce in Australia is now filled by females. So our HR department in the past few years has done a fantastic job of trying to recruit and retain some female employees down in the mine with great success. I think we're about up to 12 females right now and a total workforce of about 355 underground hourly. So lots of room for improvement, but certainly moving in the right direction. So the mine itself, we sit on the eastern edge of what's called the Michigan Basin. So a geologic structure or a salt deposit, which extends pretty much all the way over to Michigan under Lake Huron and would be mined over there as well. The beds are really uniform. So very little contortion to them. They're similar to the way they would have been laid down some 430 million years ago. Very flat, continuous, and kind of dipping gently to the southwest at about 2 degrees or so. So it's a single mining horizon, which is also very different than many mines in Ontario, where you'd be going down from the 1,000-foot level to the 2,000 to the 3,000, et cetera. We're really a single level at the 1,800-foot horizon below the lake, but we extend out very big laterally, as I showed. So the 5 kilometers west and 6 kilometers north-south is much bigger than what you would see in Sudbury, for example, in a mine. Geologic-wise, salt is a sedimentary rock. A chemical sedimentary rock would be a better definition. So sediment breaks down into kind of 2 categories. One would be clastic rocks, which would be siltstones, sandstones, conglomerates, rocks that are made up by the weathering of other rocks. So a shale or a sandstone would be a rock formed by little pieces of sand binding together and being pressed together. The chemical sedimentary rock is really when you get into magnesium chloride, salts, anhydrites, potash, things like that evaporate out of seawater. So salt itself is formed by an inland sea becoming trapped. So a giant basin of salt water that suddenly has a reef or something that separates it from the rest of the ocean. And over time, it gets salty and saltier as evaporation takes place, to the point that you actually precipitate out sodium chloride crystals that settle to the bottom. So in order for us to have such a thick seam here, you actually have a semi-closed off basin where water is able to every now and then be reintroduced to the trapped inland sea. So kind of hard to wrap your head around, but 430 million years ago, we all would have been underwater in this area as part of that trapped inland sea. And then as it got hotter and hotter, or evaporated off more and more of that water, the salt precipitated out and we're left behind with a thick seam of salt that was then buried by clastic sedimentary rocks like dolostone, sandstone, siltstone, mudstone, things like that above it. So, and where we sit in kind of the geologic era. So I mentioned about 430 million years ago is when this was deposited, so the Silurian age, and we're in a unit called the Salina Formation, the A2 salt. So that's where it sits us in the geologic scale. And then looking at that in an actual geologic cross-section, you can see that our shaft started at the top in the overburden, so what's left behind by the glaciers, glacial till. And then we sank the tunnel or the shaft down through dolomite, smoky salt, gray dolomite, alternating sequences of salt and clastic sedimentary rocks, until we finally get down to the 1760-foot depth, or 1760 to 50-foot depth, where we have our A2 mining level, clear salt. So even though we went through several other salt layers on the way down, they were either not pure enough or too thin to economically mine before we really get to this A2 level that has the clean, pure, continuous, extensive salt that we want. I mentioned that the plant in town evaporates salt. So they have wells down to about 1,000 feet where they take the smoky, clear salt out of that horizon. So there's no concerns over the solution mining in town affecting the underground mining that we do here at the mine site. So mine technology we use here at site. Until 2014, the mine operated using what I'd call the traditional method of drill and blast mining. So we would drive a small development drift at the top of the salt seam. So that'd be about 60 feet wide by 10 feet tall. And we would mine that by drilling holes in the face and loading them with explosives, as well as doing a cut at the top and bottom of the face so that when the explosives go off, the rock has somewhere to expand into. So that was called development mining, about that thickness I mentioned at the top of the seam. And then we would bring a downhole drill in and drill holes down into the floor, pack those with explosives, and blast about 45, 50 feet of the floor out simultaneously. We do use something called grouped rooms or 3-room patterns. So that is a concept called stress relief mining, where you mine 3 rooms together with small pillars in between the 3 rooms. And the thought process is that as the ground settles or squeezes those pillars, the 2 outside rooms are exposed to the most movement and damaged and unsafe, so they're ribboned off. But that movement prevents the center room from becoming damaged. So it's a group room system to improve ground conditions. So what that looks like in section, this would be a longitudinal section through a room, but we have what's shown as gas and brine zone at the top, into a dolomite, and then into the salt seam. So the little front end loader is shown in the development room that I mentioned to be about 10 feet tall. And then we blast out the floor in the area that's shown as ramp access. So while we do development, we would blast the face and use a small front end loader and haul that material to a crusher that would then put it onto a conveyor belt all the way back to the mill. So some of the equipment that we use for that, I mentioned a cut at the top and bottom, and that's what you see taking place there. So the machine is called an over-under cutter and cuts about a 6-inch slot. And it's essentially a big chainsaw. So a chainsaw equipped with picks that you would have seen in the movie so that it can cut the rock as it cycles through there. And as I mentioned, give that blast in the face room to expand when the explosives go off to make sure things break properly. So then you see the scoop tram is what we call that machine. So it's a shrunken down front end loader to fit in a low ceiling area that will dig the blasted salt out and haul it to the crusher. And then each one of the little black dots you see on the ceiling are a 8-foot long steel bolt, about 5/8 inch diameter, installed in the roof to prevent the layers of salt from sagging down and separating on us, to keep the roof above us safe. So after development is done, we come behind with the downhole drill, as I mentioned, and drill those angled long downholes shown in this picture and load those with explosives. So they'd be about 3-inch diameter, spaced every 8 feet on a square pattern. And then we would pour ANFO or ammonium nitrate fuel oil down those holes and bench blast that large chunk of salt all at once. So we really do a fairly painful process on development to use the over-under cutter, the scoop tram, to get that development done. And then when we blasted the floor out, that was really the money-making side of things, when you could use, when you could use some of the large highway type equipment you see in this photo. So great big 75-ton haul trucks and 990 front end loaders in order to remove really big quantities of salt. And you can get an idea of the scale there, where the 2 gentlemen on the right-hand side are standing up in the development lift. And then the bench face is about 45, 50 feet that was all blasted out at once. The marks you see on that salt face, the horizontal ones would be clay seams or dark salt seams. So each one of those represents some kind of event happening while the salt was being deposited. It may have been a particularly rainy year or a particularly dry year that resulted in more or less insoluble material in the seam. And then the vertical white scratches you see on that face are from some of our scaling equipment. So that comes in and scrapes the walls and face and makes sure there's no loose chunks of salt from the blast remaining that could fall down. And again, to give you an idea of the scale, you can see the development mining on the left at the very top, And then this area would have been benched out to full height with explosives. Again, some of our big equipment. And then those large trucks that haul the salt from the active mining area, about a 5-10 minute trip to a crusher where they would dump the salt in, and the crusher feeds it onto a conveyor belt network that would probably be about 10 kilometers long in total, that hauls the salt back to our mill where it's crushed and the rock is separated.
Okay, I have a meeting at 2 o'clock.
And change in technology, the bench blast mining method is an increasingly old method of mining. So I mentioned it was the traditional way of doing things, and in many cases it's becoming obsolete. So the cutter I showed before, the over-under cutter, until 2013 had not been manufactured for 30 years, becoming very, very difficult to find parts. Explosives are always a risk for men and women handling them. And in order to avoid that altogether, if we can, we would want to. Trucks and loaders that haul that blasted salt all run on diesel, and it's becoming more and more challenging in underground mines to keep air contaminants down to healthy levels. Those levels are always being reduced year after year. And also the mine is getting bigger year after year, so it's harder and harder to ventilate out, 6 kilometers under the lake. And that was really becoming a challenge around 2014. So the decision was made to look into what else could be used for production. And we looked to continuous mining. So instead of drilling and blasting, it's really a mechanical cutting machine that you saw in that video. So we purchased 2 of them in 2013, and we purchased 3 more prior to 2017 and moved away from blasting altogether. So at this point in time, all of our production is made by mechanical cutting methods and no explosives. So that consists of the miner itself cutting the salt and then dumping it onto a flexible conveyor belt behind it, and then onto our conveyor belt system feeding the mill. So right from the face, it is continuously hauled to the mill without any human intervention through front end loaders or trucks. And since the miners cut about 14 feet tall, instead of doing a development lift and then blasting the floor out, we do the entire room in 4 lifts. So 4 14 to 15 foot cuts. So we end up with the same size room as drill and blast, just cut in a different manner. And you really see that in this photo versus the previous one. So the orange machine shown is the continuous miner, and then the flexible conveyor belt behind it. So that can follow the miner around 90-degree turns, the conveyor belt, while still keeping the salt on top. And here you can see the first one of those machines completely assembled. So the cutter drum is shown at the very top there, filled with picks, as mentioned. It cuts the salt off the face and drops it down where this gathering pan has spinning paddles, spins it onto the center of the machine and up and out the back where it dumps into the flexible conveyor train behind it. Some pictures of the machine cutting. And this is the flexible conveyor behind it. So it has a hopper that the salt dumps into in the left-hand photo, and then a crusher wheel that feeds that salt onto the flexible belt behind. And here in the 2 bottom photos, you can see the flexible belt hopper underneath the tail of the miner receiving salt. And again, the flexible hopper under the tail of the miner cutting. Some photos in here. So again, some of our people and equipment. One of our mining crews is shown in the top left. On the right-hand side, you can see some diamond drilling taking place. So that's for exploration of the salt seam in front of us. In this area, you can see the bands within the salt are very contorted compared to that perfectly horizontal. So there are some discontinuities within the salt seam that we will bring in an exploration diamond drill and drill long 1,000-foot holes out into the seam to see what lies ahead of us before we mine through that area. Some of the support activities will be shown in this photo. So you can see in the top left, that's one of our high reach units. So those cranes can reach about 60 feet in the air with 2 people in a personnel basket. And they use scaling bars or crowbars to strike the salt and make sure there's no loose blocks that could fall down over time as the salt continuously moves and loosens up. And then in the bottom right photo, you can see one of our excavators that happens to have a cutter head on the end of it so that it can be used to trim bad spots on the walls and ceiling. And I mentioned some of our scaling equipment that is used to scratch the walls and make sure it's safe. So that's what you see in the top right photo is a 992 front end loader with a large scraping head on the front of it instead of a bucket. The top left is a continuous miner. The bottom left is two of our high reach units installing support into the ceiling. So some of those 8-foot long or 12-foot long steel bolts that we put in on a 4-foot by 4-foot pattern to support things. And then the bottom right is one of our miner operators quite covered in dust. And I should mention on that previous slide, especially in the movie, you would have seen as the miner cuts, there's an incredible amount of dust generated. So these are coal mining types of equipment used throughout the US, Australia, Africa to cut coal in the same manner. But obviously in a coal mine, you have to deal with explosive dust and black lung. So we don't have that problem in a salt mine. Salt has been proven to be what's called a nuisance dust. So no real long-term health effects of breathing that material in year after year. It's really a visibility problem where we can't have it too dusty, too foggy in a heading that you can't see equipment traveling in and out or personnel. So a nice shot of the mine at night is shown there. And then some of our community engagements. So certainly Goderich Compass Minerals is the largest employer in Goderich. So we try to be a great community steward and support as much as we can in the local area, whether that's through fiscal donations, certainly to the hospital. We've been in talks with purchasing a new MRI piece of equipment, but also we try to support any local golf tournaments for the Rotary Club, as you can see in the top right. Our family tour day was incredibly supported by Rotary as well through cooking hot dogs and meals for the people that came and saw the mine. And even smaller scale things like the management team will often participate in cleanups of local group homes or retirement homes in the fall season. So really in the last couple of years, we've done fantastic to try and get out there and become the real fantastic corporate citizen that we should be as the major employer. And on that note, it's incredible. I mentioned in my intro that I had worked at a site in New Brunswick that unfortunately was shuttered after a couple of years of production. But it was really heartbreaking to see a similar sized town, how much the town relied on both the income from employees, but the income from the mine itself. It's remarkable how many small businesses, how many excavating companies, mechanical, plumbing, heating, restaurants, hotels, everything is really supported by the money that Compass spends in this town. So it's a fantastic employer for someone like myself here, but fantastic for the community as well to have this great corporate citizen.
We would like to thank you for your presentation today. I think we've all been looking forward to it. Malcolm has been talking about your presentation and the video for I think 2 months now. It was very interesting, and that's why I think we'll have lots of questions and we'd like you to stick around. But in recognition of your presentation to our club today, a contribution has been made to the Polio Plus campaign of the Rotary Foundation to immunize 50 infants against polio. Because of you, Rotary is one step closer to a polio-free world. So we'll let you run and get your coffee, and we'll see you in about 10, 12 minutes.
Excellent. I'm very appreciative, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So quick introduction for past President Diane to talk about the Ray Lawson Rotarian of the Year Award.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year to you all. So for those of you who were not at our December live holiday dinner, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. The Honorable Ray Lawson Rotarian of the Year Award was presented for the first time in 1975 when John Eberhard was president of our club. President John invited the Honorable Ray Lawson to attend the Rotary meeting where an award was to be given out in his honor. Ray Lawson, the second of 3 generations in our club, was a founding father of our club and served as a member from 1915 to 1980. He served as president in 1919 to 1920. Ray Lawson served as Lieutenant Governor of Ontario from 1946 to 1952. He also served as the Canadian Consul General in New York from 1953 to 1955. And from 1948 to 1956, he was the Chancellor of University of King's College, Halifax, Nova Scotia. So the purpose of this prestigious award is to recognize a member of the Rotary Club of London who has been highly involved in club activities and may have also been active in Rotary District 6330 activities, traits that were exemplified by the Honorable Ray Lawson. All members of the Rotary Club of London during the 2021 Rotary year were eligible for this award, with the exception of board members who sat on the board of directors last year and previous award winners. The recipient of this year's award was Kirk Langford, and he received 4 nominations. Kirk has been a past outbound youth exchange participant. He was a past chairperson of our satellite club. He made significant contribution to the district conference committee as a representative of the Rotary Club of London Satellite Club. He was a significant contributor to the district environmental noon Zoom meetings. He contributed to the district youth exchange 50th anniversary virtual event. He was appointed as the district 6330 Rotary Youth Exchange Outbound Coordinator in 2021. And finally, even at the international level, he was a general session guest speaker at the RI convention in Toronto. So at our December 13th holiday dinner at the Marion Bad, I was extremely pleased to award Kirk with this very well-deserved, the 2020 Ray Lawson Rotarian of the Year Award. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And I am going to call on Steve Knox to give us an update on membership.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to mention that the board has been busy as our membership has aged. And a few of our members have, they tried to resign, but we didn't let them. And we have bestowed honorary membership in June to Del McLennan and Marilyn Neufeld. Del was a member of our club since 1966. So certainly a well-deserved award to him. And Marilyn joined in 1981. In November, we added Doug McTavish and Philippe Gomes as honorary members. And Doug McTavish started in 1997 and Philippe was in 1993. So all of them had been members for a long time and contributed greatly to the success of our club. And sadly, I'd also like to mention that we've had a few resignations in the last couple months. COVID has been difficult for everyone, but Van Robson Hayes, who has been a very active member at our district level in youth. Also Andrew Adamick, who is looking for a job in the States and will be moving on. And Jim McCabe, who again, longtime member, past presidents, and we regret they're moving on. So that's all I have today.
Wonderful. And a quick update, we did collect some toys during our holiday dinner or the days before and after at the Marion Bad. Jerry was willing to host us for a toy collection and pickup. And Jerry and I were able to deliver it to the Salvation Army a few days after our holiday dinner. And this is just a portion of the haul. We had to get in and out quickly, but this is a portion of the toys that were donated. So thank you to everyone in the club for contributing toys to the Salvation Army toy drive. And are there any other announcements for the club?
Don, it's John. I just want to thank all of you for that donation from the center here. We had an interesting year this year with hampers, food hampers and toy bags, but we were able to hand out 6,500 bags of toys to kids in this community this year. So very happy with that.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. And Diane, you have your hand raised. Did you have an announcement?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Let me just lower my hand. So the London Food Bank is looking for our help in January and February. During COVID, there has been some groups that have had to cancel, like the Scouts and the Beavers and some different school groups for obvious reasons. So they're looking for Wednesday, January 19th from 6:30 to 8 and Wednesday, February 16th, same time. And I know this does conflict with our board meetings, but hopefully maybe people that aren't on the board might be available. You can bring your family. I just need to know names and everything. They'll only have 12 each time. High school students looking for volunteer hours. We already have one signed up. So just, kind of thinking it doesn't just have to be Rotarians. And but you do have to be double vaxxed. So that's the one stipulation, but I'm hoping I can reach out to everybody and just send me your name if you're interested in helping out. That'd be great.
And that is everything for our meeting today. Thank you very much, everyone. A reminder that we in Rotary serve to change lives, and have a great week. We'll see you next week.